If Bitcoin Cash became the world's everyday currency, it would be the greatest full-circle moment in the story of digital money. Bitcoin's original dream, peer-to-peer electronic cash, was born in 2009, but it got lost as the main chain became too slow and expensive. Bitcoin Cash, forked in 2017, carried that torch forward: fast, cheap, borderless payments. Now imagine a world where that vision actually won. Governments crumble under inflation. Citizens, tired of manipulated fiat systems, start trading and saving in Bitcoin Cash because it just works. Transactions confirm in seconds, fees cost less than a penny, and people in remote villages or bustling cities can buy food, pay rent, or send remittances instantly. It's not digital gold, it's digital cash, alive and circulating. The shift wouldn't happen overnight. It would start at the edges, in Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, regions where inflation punishes savers and banking access is scarce. There, crypto isn't a speculative bet, it's survival. In places like Venezuela or Nigeria, merchants already use crypto for daily transactions. Imagine those same merchants moving from unstable stablecoins or volatile tokens to Bitcoin Cash, attracted by low fees and reliability. BCH would become the street money of the digital age, the people's currency, not the banker's coin. And as small businesses and cross-border trade adopt it, network effects ignite. The more it's used, the more valuable it becomes. Next comes the infrastructure wave. Mobile wallets, NFC cards, and offline payment nodes appear powered by BCH. Telecom companies and fintech startups in emerging markets start integrating it directly into their systems. Governments, desperate to stabilize trade, grudgingly accept it for taxes or imports. The moment one mid-sized nation declares it legal tender, even partially, the dominoes begin to fall. Global remittance corridors light up with activity. Western Union and MoneyGram become obsolete relics. BCH's liquidity grows, exchanges integrate faster rails, and its market cap begins to soar. What was once a Bitcoin fork becomes the backbone of human commerce. Now let's entertain the blue sky path, how it could rise to $25,000 per coin and even beyond. If BCH captured just 10% of the global money supply used for transactions, M1, that would imply trillions in circulation. With roughly 19 million BCH in existence, each coin would need to represent tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in purchasing power to handle that scale. If it reached the level of global medium of exchange dominance, where daily payments, payrolls, and trade settlements rely on it, $25,000 wouldn't be fantasy. It would be equilibrium. Prices would stabilize around its velocity and utility, not speculation. At that stage, people would measure salaries and product prices directly in BCH, not in fiat equivalents. The psychological flip would be complete. But the 200K scenario, that's the wild one. That happens if Bitcoin Cash becomes not only the medium of exchange, but also the unit of account and store of value across continents. Imagine hyperinflation wiping out major currencies like the dollar, euro, or yen. Central banks try digital currencies, but people reject centralized control. BCH steps in as neutral, decentralized, and accessible to all. Entire economies settle invoices and payrolls on-chain. Energy companies start accepting BCH for oil shipments. Tech giants issue paychecks in it. Even governments hoard it as a reserve asset to stabilize trade. With global monetary collapse and trust erosion, capital floods into any form of sound money that works. That's when each BCH could represent $200,000 or more, not from hype, but necessity. Of course, that path requires evolution. BCH's scalability and governance must keep pace with global demand. Developers would roll out adaptive block sizes, sidechains, and privacy layers to maintain speed and resilience. Security improvements like smart escrow and instant confirmations would make it enterprise-ready. Large retailers like Amazon or Alibaba could integrate BCH payments directly, bypassing credit networks. At that point, the average person wouldn't even know they were using crypto. BCH would just be money. The key catalyst might come from one region triggering global momentum, a perfect storm. Imagine Southeast Asia's billion-strong market embracing BCH as the de facto standard for trade and remittances. The Philippines, Indonesia, and Thailand adopt it to move billions daily without banks. Africa joins next, using BCH rails to bypass IMF systems. Latin America follows, eager to escape dollar dependency. Global settlements shift from SWIFT to blockchain. The IMF and World Bank panic too late. By the time Wall Street reacts, the liquidity has already migrated. When institutional capital notices the trend, they'll scramble to buy exposure. Hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, and payment processors will realize the network has become too big to ignore. Then the second wave hits, speculative but strategic. It mirrors the early Bitcoin mania, but this time backed by real use, not memes. 10K becomes 25K, then 50K. At 200K, BCH would rival gold's market cap, the moment fiat faith collapses and humanity returns to peer-to-peer trust. Still, it wouldn't be utopia. Governments would fight back, enforcing taxes, demanding visibility, and launching surveillance currencies. BCH might exist in parallel with state coins for years. But because it's decentralized and censorship-resistant, it would survive every ban, every restriction, every smear campaign. It would thrive underground just like cash always has. Over time, its resilience becomes its marketing. The currency they can't kill. That tagline alone could spark adoption among younger generations who distrust traditional systems. At the same time, artificial intelligence and IoT economies could integrate BCH as machine-to-machine payment rails. Self-driving cars paying tolls, drones buying electricity, digital agents settling micro-contracts. It becomes the default language of exchange for both humans and algorithms. The line between financial network and communication network blurs, forming a new global operating system powered by Bitcoin Cash. By the late 2030s or 2040s, if this trajectory holds, BCH could become the silent standard beneath a multi-currency world, not necessarily replacing fiat, but outlasting it. Its decentralization, simplicity, and real-world utility give it the qualities that make money timeless: scarcity, transferability, divisibility, and trustlessness. The same things that made gold universal would make BCH universal, but now digital, instant, and global. As adoption scales, the psychological shift would be monumental. People wouldn't invest in Bitcoin Cash, they'd use it. The idea of buying BCH to sell later would fade, replaced by earning, spending, and saving it as a normal part of life. Merchants would price goods in BCH by default. A cup of coffee might cost 0.0002 BCH, a car 5 BCH, a house 100. Stable pricing emerges because of velocity. The more it circulates, the less volatile it becomes. Central banks could no longer print their way out of crises. Fiscal responsibility would return not through politics, but through math. That's the irony. A decentralized ledger bringing order to chaotic economies. the social impact would be enormous. Billions of unbanked people suddenly enter the global economy with nothing more than a smartphone. No more account closures, overdraft fees, or gatekeepers. BCH would bridge the wealth gap, not by charity, but by inclusion. Imagine a small farmer in Kenya instantly selling crops to a restaurant in Japan. No middlemen, no currency conversion, no delay. Or migrant workers sending money home in seconds without losing 10% to remittance fees. That's the promise of Bitcoin Cash as everyday currency, financial sovereignty, scaled to the human race. Meanwhile, corporate and institutional integration would normalize it further. Companies like PayPal, Square, and Stripe could layer BCH payments into their platforms, allowing seamless conversions between crypto and fiat. Major retailers would follow: Walmart, Carrefour, Mercado Libre, using it to slash processing costs. The fee savings alone could add billions to global commerce efficiency. Even credit card giants like Visa or MasterCard might pivot, using BCH rails behind the scenes while maintaining familiar user interfaces. By that point, whether people realize it or not, they'd already be living in a Bitcoin Cash world. The $25,000 price mark would likely arrive during this phase, where utility meets scarcity. Demand outpaces new supply, and every coin becomes more valuable as circulation deepens. BCH's halving cycles would create predictable supply squeezes, while global adoption adds exponential demand pressure. At 25K, the total market cap would approach tens of trillions, on par with the world's physical cash. And still, that wouldn't be the ceiling. Because once people trust BCH more than government currency, the value ceiling disappears. Trust is the true backing of money, and BCH, unlike fiat, can't betray it. The 200K scenario, though extraordinary, could arise during a macroeconomic shock, something history never forgets. Imagine hyperinflation hitting the US dollar, the euro fragmenting, and debt markets imploding. When fiat collapses, confidence evaporates overnight. People rush into any asset that holds purchasing power: gold, Bitcoin, real estate. But BCH, being spendable and scalable, becomes the practical refuge. It's not a vault asset, it's a life asset. Nations in crisis adopt it not for ideology, but survival. By then, BCH would represent global trust, just as the dollar once did. At 200K per coin, it wouldn't mean hyper-wealth, it would mean hyper-collapse of everything else. One BCH could feed a family for months, not because BCH rose, but because fiat fell. In that world, the people who prepared early would thrive. Yet even without collapse, a more gradual and optimistic path could unfold. The internet continues decentralizing. Nations adopt mixed monetary systems. Digital cash, CBDCs, and crypto coexist. BCH integrates into global trade through decentralized payment gateways and AI-based accounting tools. Over time, multinational corporations start keeping BCH reserves, not to speculate but to transact faster. It becomes the lubricant of commerce, invisible but essential, like TCP/IP for money. Every purchase, every remittance, every payroll transaction could quietly touch the BCH network, just as every website today relies on protocols most people never see. Money becomes code, and BCH becomes that code's purest form. Even philosophically, its rise would mark a turning point. Humanity's relationship with money has always been rooted in trust, from shells to gold to paper. Bitcoin Cash would restore that trust not through authority, but through transparency. It proves every transaction, every supply limit, every rule, right there, visible to anyone. In a sense, BCH would embody a spiritual evolution as much as an economic one. A movement from faith in governments to faith in mathematics, from permission to freedom. That's what Satoshi envisioned, not control but choice. Critics will always argue that governments won't allow it, that power never yields without a fight. True, but the internet made censorship nearly impossible. People routed around television, music and media empires. They'll do the same with money. BCH doesn't need approval. It needs usage. And as long as there's one node running, one transaction confirming, one person sending value without permission, the flame stays alive. Like fire, it spreads through necessity, invisible until it lights the world. So, if Bitcoin Cash truly became the world's everyday currency, it would mean more than price charts or profits. It would mean humanity rediscovered what money was always meant to be, an honest measure of value, energy, and effort. The dream of digital cash wouldn't just live, it would lead. From corner stores in Lagos to skyscrapers in New York, the same network would hum quietly in the background, proving every day that freedom doesn't need permission, only adoption. And maybe one day when historians look back, they'll say, Bitcoin was the spark. But Bitcoin Cash was the flame that caught the world. Truly thank you for watching. May all eyes who reflect these words and hear this message be blessed. Subscribe and please give a thumbs up.